That night, as my son yelled, "Get out, Dad! My wife doesn't want you here," in front of 200 guests, I understood that there are words you never forget and never forgive. My name is Charles Morrison, but everyone calls me Charlie. I'm 58 years old, and this is the story of how a wedding destroyed a family, but also saved my legacy. It was supposed to be the most anticipated day. We had been planning everything for months. The Hill Country Club outside Austin was decorated with white roses and golden ribbons that caught the evening light. The band had been playing since sunset, their music drifting across the manicured lawns where oil executives and construction contractors mingled with champagne glasses. The tables were covered with imported linen that cost more than most people's monthly rent. Everything was perfect, or so I thought. My son Brandon was marrying Amber Pierce, that ambitious woman with calculating green eyes and a smile that never quite reached her heart. She appeared in our lives 3 years ago and changed everything. I should have seen the warning signs then, but love makes fools of us all, even fathers who think they know better. I was wearing my best Navy suit, the one I bought when Morrison Construction and Ranching Co. hit our first $1 million year back in 2015. I had my father's gold Rolex, the one he wore when he signed his first big contract in the oil fields. My boots were polished to a mirror shine, and I'd even gotten a fresh haircut from Maria at the barbershop in town. I wanted to look respectable for my only son's wedding, to show these Austin society folks that a man could build something meaningful with his hands and still clean up nice. When I arrived at the country club, parking my F-250 between a line of luxury sedans and sports cars, Amber saw me immediately. She was holding court near the reception entrance, her white dress catching the light like spun silk, surrounded by bridesmaids in dusty rows. She didn't say a word to me directly. She never did when there were witnesses around. Instead, she whispered something urgent in Brandon's ear, her manicured fingers gripping his arm while her eyes stayed locked on me. Brandon's face changed instantly. The easy smile he'd been wearing for the photographers disappeared, replaced by that tight expression I'd learned to recognize over the past year. He walked toward me with quick, purposeful steps, his jaw clenched the way it used to get when he was 7 years old and knew he'd broken something valuable. "Dad," he began, his voice carefully modulated so the nearby guests couldn't overhear. "Amber says your suit is too flashy, that the navy blue is stealing attention from her dress." I felt like someone had sucker-punched me in the chest, but I kept my expression neutral. 33 years of running a construction business teaches you not to let every hit show on your face. "It's fine, son. I can change if you want. I brought a gray suit in the truck, just in case something like this happened." "No, Dad." His voice turned harsh, cold in a way that reminded me of his mother when she was truly angry about something. "It's better if you leave. Now." What? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. This was my boy, the kid I'd raised alone for 15 years after his mother died. The young man I'd taught to read blueprints and negotiate with suppliers. "Amber is very nervous about today. She says your presence makes her tense, that you've always judged her choices, always made her feel unwelcome in our family." The country club was full of guests, all dressed in their finest clothes. Austin's business elite, construction industry colleagues I'd known for decades, family friends who'd watched Brandon grow up. The music was playing softly in the background. People were laughing and toasting, taking photos with their phones, completely oblivious to what was happening just 10 feet from the head table where the bride's family sat in smug satisfaction. "Brandon, I'm your father. I helped pay for half of this wedding. I built the business that's paying for this reception right now. And you think that gives you the right to ruin my wife's perfect day?" he yelled, his voice rising above the ambient noise of conversation and clinking glasses. The effect was immediate and devastating. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. Heads turned our way. The photographer lowered his camera. Even the band seemed to falter for a moment before continuing their instrumental version of "At Last." Then he said it, loud and clear, making sure everyone within a 50-foot radius could hear every word. "Get out, Dad. My wife doesn't want you here, and neither do I." I felt something break inside me. Something that had been holding together for 33 years of building a business, 15 years of raising a son alone, 3 years of watching that son change into someone I barely recognized. But I didn't cry. I didn't yell back. I didn't make a scene that would give Amber more ammunition to use against me later. I just nodded my head once, pulled my truck keys from my pocket, and walked toward the parking lot. My boots clicked on the stone pathway, each step echoing in the sudden silence that had fallen over our section of the reception. No one stopped me. No one followed me. My longtime business partner, Jim Patterson, caught my eye and started to stand, but I shook my head slightly, letting him know this wasn't his fight. I got in my truck and drove back to the ranch, taking the long way through the hill country where my grandfather had first settled, where 3 generations of Morrison men had learned that a man's word and a day's honest work were worth more than all the social climbing and networking in the world. The corporate seal of Morrison Construction was waiting for me in my home office when I got back, hanging in its frame next to photos of projects we'd completed over 33 years, hospitals, schools, office buildings that would outlast us all. That seal represented everything I'd built from scratch, the same business Brandon had wanted increasing control of ever since he'd married Amber and started talking about optimization and growth strategies. I went home, took off the navy suit, and folded it carefully in the closet next to my wife's dresses that I still couldn't bring myself to donate. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat in the kitchen with a cup of black coffee, the same French roast blend I'd been drinking since I started the company in 1985. The taste brought back memories of better times, when my son and I were a team instead of adversaries. Because that's how it was before Amber. Before she came into our lives with her marketing degrees and networking contacts, my son and I were partners in every sense of the word. After my wife Sarah died 15 years ago, it was just the two of us and the business. We learned to survive together, to build something meaningful from the ashes of our grief. Brandon was only 15 when I became a widower. Cancer took his mother in 6 brutal months, leaving behind a quiet kid with his father's hands and his mother's gentle heart. He tried to be strong for me in ways that still break my heart to remember. "Dad, I can handle the office work," he would say, carrying ledgers that seemed too heavy for his teenage frame. "I can answer phones, file contracts, whatever you need." "No, son, you're still in school. Focus on your grades." "But Dad, I want to help save the company. I know things are tight since Mom got sick." And things were tight. The medical bills had nearly bankrupted us. I'd mortgaged the ranch twice, sold equipment, let good employees go just to keep the doors open. But somehow, with Brandon's help and determination that belied his age, we survived. More than survived. We found a way to honor Sarah's memory by building something she would have been proud of. He learned the business from the ground up, starting with filing and gradually working his way into real responsibility. By the time he was 17, he could read blueprints better than men twice his age. He understood the delicate balance of managing subcontractors, staying on budget, and keeping clients happy. When I was too exhausted or too heartbroken to deal with a difficult customer, Brandon would step in with a maturity that amazed everyone who worked with us. "Everything's going to be all right, Dad," he would tell me on the nights when missing Sarah felt like drowning. "We're going to build something great together, I promise." And he kept that promise, at least for a while. He became a man within the walls of our ranch house, under the oak trees my grandfather planted when he first bought this land in 1962. When Brandon finished college at UT Austin with a business degree and a minor in construction management, he came straight back home. "Dad, my place is here with you and the company. This is where I belong." Those words made me prouder than any contract we'd ever signed, any building we'd ever completed. Here was my boy, educated and ambitious, choosing to come home and build on what we'd started together instead of chasing opportunities in Dallas or Houston. We worked side by side for 7 years after he graduated. I handled the big picture strategy, client relations, and the kind of relationship building that takes decades to develop. Brandon managed day-to-day operations, brought in new technology systems, and handled the younger subcontractors who related better to someone their own age. It was a perfect partnership. In the evenings, we'd sit on the porch with cold beers and leftover barbecue, talking about the future of Morrison Construction. The ranch stretched out before us, 200 acres of rolling hills where cattle grazed and oil pumps worked quietly in the distance. It wasn't the biggest spread in Texas, but it was ours, and it represented everything our family had built over 3 generations. "You know, Dad," Brandon would say, watching the sunset paint the sky orange and purple, "one day my kids are going to grow up here just like I did. They're going to learn the value of honest work, understand what it means to build something with your own hands. I hope so, son. I hope you find a woman who understands what we've built here, what it represents." He would smile and nod, his eyes already dreaming of that future. "I'm going to find her, Dad. Someone who gets it, who wants to be part of this legacy instead of trying to change it into something else." "Take your time choosing," I'd tell him. "The right woman will appreciate what you have to offer. The wrong one will see only what she thinks she can get from you." Looking back, those words feel prophetic. But at the time, I was just a father trying to pass on the hard-earned wisdom of a man who'd learned the difference between love and ambition the expensive way. The phone rang, jolting me back to the present. It was 6 a.m. and Brandon's name showed on the caller ID. My heart jumped, hoping this early call meant he'd come to his senses, that he wanted to apologize for what happened at the wedding. "Dad." His voice sounded tired, strained. "Can you come to the office? We need to talk." I hung up without answering. Something in his tone told me this wasn't going to be the conversation I hoped for. This wasn't my son calling to make amends. This was someone else. Someone shaped by 3 years of Amber's influence, calling to finish what they'd started at the wedding. I sat in that kitchen for another hour, looking at the framed photos on the wall. Brandon at age 8, helping me frame a house. Brandon at 12, learning to operate heavy equipment. Brandon at 18, accepting his high school graduation diploma with Sarah's smile and my stubborn chin. Brandon at 25, shaking hands with our biggest client after landing the contract that put us firmly in the black for the first time since Sarah's medical bills. All those memories, all those years of building something together, and it had come to this. A phone call from my own son that felt like a business appointment, not a family conversation. But it didn't happen the way we dreamed. Brandon met Amber Pierce at a construction industry conference in Austin 3 years ago. She was working as a marketing consultant for a firm that specialized in optimizing brand positioning for mid-market construction companies. Those were her exact words when Brandon introduced her to me, delivered with the kind of practiced smile that belongs in boardrooms and networking events. She was undeniably attractive. Tall, blonde, with sharp green eyes and the kind of polished appearance that comes from expensive clothes and professional styling. She wore a tailored business suit and carried herself with the confidence of someone accustomed to getting what she wanted. When she spoke, it was in the language of modern business, synergies, market penetration, scalable solutions. "Your son tells me you've built an impressive operation here, Mr. Morrison," she said during our first meeting, her eyes already scanning the ranch house, calculating, evaluating. "There's definitely potential for significant growth if you implement the right strategic initiatives." I should have paid more attention to that word. Potential. In my experience, when consultants start talking about your potential, they're really talking about what they can extract from you. The first time Brandon brought her to the ranch for dinner, I watched her reaction carefully. She stepped out of Brandon's truck wearing designer jeans and heels completely inappropriate for ranch life, her phone in her hand as she took photos of everything from the front porch to the cattle pens. "You actually live here?" she asked, looking at our farmhouse like it was a historical curiosity rather than a home where 3 generations of my family had been born, lived, and died. "We live here," Brandon corrected her quickly, his voice carrying a defensive edge I'd never heard before. "It's beautiful, isn't it? The land has been in the family since 1962. Amber smiled, but her eyes were already working, already planning. "It's very authentic. Rustic charm is definitely having a moment right now. There's serious commercial potential here if you positioned it correctly." Commercial potential. She looked at our family home and saw a business opportunity. From that day forward, I watched my son begin to change. It started with small things, coming home later from their dates, spending more time on his phone, using words like optimization and market positioning in conversations about fence repairs and cattle feed. He stopped joining me on the porch for our evening talks, claiming he was too busy with strategic planning sessions with Amber. Within 6 months, those planning sessions had produced what Amber called a comprehensive development proposal for Morrison Construction. She arrived at our office one morning with a presentation, folder and a laptop full of charts and projections. "Mr. Morrison," she began, setting up what looked like a formal business presentation in our conference room, "I've been analyzing your company's performance metrics, and I see tremendous opportunities for revenue enhancement. Our revenue is fine, Amber. We're profitable, we're growing steadily, and our clients trust us. But imagine what you could achieve with proper market expansion," she continued, clicking through slides that showed projected growth curves and market analysis. Brandon and I have identified several strategic initiatives that could triple your annual revenue within 18 months. Triple our revenue. In 33 years of business, I'd learned that anyone promising to triple anything in 18 months was either naive or lying. What kind of strategic initiatives? I asked. Event venue conversion for starters. This ranch could easily host corporate retreats, executive conferences, high-end weddings. We're talking about premium pricing for exclusive experiences. Turn our home into a business? Turn your underutilized asset into a profit center, she corrected. Brandon has already identified several potential corporate clients who would pay significant money for authentic Texas ranch experiences. I looked at my son, who was nodding enthusiastically. Dad, Amber's right. We're sitting on a gold mine here. The event industry in Austin is exploding, and we have something unique to offer. We have a home, Brandon, a place where your mother is buried, where your grandfather built his life. We have both, Amber interjected smoothly. There's no reason you can't honor your family history while also maximizing your return on investment. Maximizing return on investment. She was talking about my life like it was a portfolio to be optimized. The changes accelerated after that presentation. Brandon started wearing different clothes, designer shirts instead of work clothes, expensive watches instead of the practical Timex he'd worn since college. He traded his reliable Ford pickup for a BMW sedan, claiming he needed to project success when meeting with potential clients. Our evening conversations, when they happened at all, became discussions about scaling up operations and leveraging our brand equity. He talked about hiring marketing consultants, developing social media strategies, and partnering with event planners in Austin. Every suggestion originated from Amber, filtered through Brandon's growing enthusiasm for what he called taking the company to the next level. Dad, we could be making serious money here, he would say, his eyes bright with possibilities I couldn't share. Amber has connections throughout the Austin business community. She knows people who could help us expand into markets we've never even considered. What's wrong with the markets we're already in? We've built solid relationships over decades. Nothing's wrong with them, but they're limiting our growth potential. We're thinking too small, being too conservative. Too conservative. Coming from the boy I'd raised to understand that sustainable growth was better than quick profits, that reputation mattered more than revenue. The breaking point came during a family barbecue 6 months before the wedding. Amber spent the entire afternoon on her phone, taking calls about other projects while the rest of us tried to enjoy a simple Sunday meal. When my neighbor Jim Patterson stopped by to discuss a potential joint project, Amber immediately inserted herself into the conversation. Jim, have you considered expanding your customer base beyond traditional construction clients? She asked, her consultant persona fully activated. There are significant opportunities in the corporate event space that you and Charlie could pursue together. Jim looked confused. We build houses and commercial buildings, Miss Pierce. That's what we do. That's what you do now, she said. But that's not necessarily what you should be doing to maximize profitability. After Jim left, shaking his head in bewilderment, I pulled Brandon aside. Son, your girlfriend just insulted one of my oldest friends and business partners. She was trying to help, Dad. Jim's thinking too small, just like you, just like me. My own son was telling me I was thinking too small about the business I'd built from nothing. The morning after the wedding, that phone call came at 6 a.m. sharp. When I finally decided to face whatever Brandon had to say, I drove to the Morrison construction office, the same metal building I'd constructed with my own hands 30 years ago. It sat on 5 acres just outside town, with equipment yards full of excavators, bulldozers, and concrete trucks that represented decades of careful investment and maintenance. Brandon was already there when I arrived, sitting behind the desk that used to be mine, wearing a crisp white shirt and tie at 7 a.m. on a Sunday morning. The casual work clothes he'd grown up in had been replaced by what Amber called his executive wardrobe. Even his posture was different, straighter, more formal, like he was playing a role in a business drama. Dad, thanks for coming, he said, gesturing to the chair across from him like I was a client instead of his father. What's this about, son? Amber and I have been discussing the future of the company. We think it's time for some significant changes in our operational structure. Operational structure. More of Amber's vocabulary creeping into my son's mouth. What kind of changes? He pulled out a folder, one of those expensive portfolio cases Amber favored for her presentations. We want to modernize our business model. Bring in outside expertise to help us scale more efficiently. Outside expertise? I felt that familiar chill, the same one I'd gotten when Amber first started talking about our potential. Investment partners, Dad. People who understand how to grow family businesses into regional operations. This is a regional operation. Brandon, we work all over Central Texas. We've got more business than we can handle, but we're turning away opportunities because we don't have the capital or infrastructure to handle larger projects. Amber's been talking to some people who could help us expand our capacity significantly. What people? Sterling Capital Group. They specialize in helping established companies take the next step. They've got the resources to help us bid on major projects, state contracts, corporate developments, the kind of work that could make us one of the biggest construction companies in Texas. I'd been in business long enough to recognize the warning signs. When consultants start talking about making you one of the biggest anything, they're usually planning to own whatever you become. And what do these people want in return for their help? Brandon shifted uncomfortably. A partnership arrangement. They'd provide capital investment and management expertise in exchange for equity participation. How much equity? That would depend on the level of investment they provide. But Dad, think about what this could mean. Instead of building 1 or 2 projects at a time, we could be running 10 or 15 simultaneously. Instead of $2.8 million in annual revenue, we could be doing $8 million, maybe $10 million. And instead of owning our own company, we'd be junior partners in someone else's operation. We'd be part of a larger organization with more resources and opportunities. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the equipment yard where machines I'd bought and paid for sat ready for another week of honest work. Brandon, let me tell you something about partnerships. When someone comes to you with promises of easy money and unlimited growth, they're not offering you a partnership. They're offering you a buyout disguised as an opportunity. That's not what this is, Dad. Amber's done her research. Sterling Capital has an excellent track record with companies like ours. Companies like ours? What do you know about their track record? Have you talked to the original owners of those companies? Have you asked them how their partnerships worked out? Dad, you're being paranoid. This is how modern business works. You have to be willing to take calculated risks to achieve significant growth. Calculated risks. Significant growth. All phrases that sounded like Amber's strategic planning vocabulary. Son, I've been taking calculated risks for 33 years. The difference between a calculated risk and gambling is that you calculate based on information you can verify, not promises someone makes in a presentation. Amber's not making promises. She's presenting opportunities based on solid market analysis. Amber's not presenting anything. She's selling something, and you're the product. Brandon's face flushed. That's not fair, Dad. Amber's trying to help our family build wealth and security by convincing you to hand over control of the business that's already providing security to people who've never worked a day in their lives building anything real. Sterling Capital has 40 years of experience in business development and growth management. 40 years of buying companies and stripping them for parts, more likely. You don't know that. You haven't even met with them. I don't need to meet with them. I've seen their type before. Financial engineers who move money around on spreadsheets and call it productivity. Brandon slammed his hand on the desk. This is exactly the problem, Dad. You refuse to consider any ideas that didn't originate with you. You're so stuck in your old ways of doing business that you can't see the opportunities right in front of you. Old ways? Brandon, these old ways have kept this company profitable through 3 recessions, the 2008 financial crisis, and a global pandemic. Our clients trust us because we deliver what we promise on time and on budget. That's not old-fashioned, that's timeless. But it's also limiting our growth potential. Growth potential. I turned back to face him. Let me ask you something. When you were growing up, did you ever want for anything important? Food, clothes, education, opportunities? No, but did this company pay for your college education? Yes, but Dad, that's not the point. That's exactly the point. This company has provided everything our family ever needed. But now it's not enough because Amber's convinced you that enough is never enough. She's not convinced me of anything. She's opened my eyes to possibilities I never considered. Like turning our family ranch into a corporate event venue. Like maximizing the return on our assets instead of letting them sit idle. Maximizing return on assets. Pure Amber speak. Brandon, this ranch isn't an asset. It's our home. It's where your mother is buried. It's where your great-grandfather first settled when he came to Texas with nothing but determination and a willingness to work. It's both, Dad. It can be our home and a profitable business. There's no reason we can't honor our history while also building our future. Whose future? Yours and mine, or yours and Amber's? The question hung in the air between us like smoke from a grass fire. Brandon looked away, unable or unwilling to meet my eyes. Dad, I love Amber. She's my wife. We're building a life together, and that includes making smart financial decisions. Financial decisions about a business you didn't build, using land you didn't buy, with relationships you didn't develop. I've been working in this business since I was 15 years old. I've earned the right to have a voice in its future. You've always had a voice, son. What you're asking for now isn't a voice. It's control. The conversation might have ended there, with father and son agreeing to disagree about the future of the business. But Amber had taught Brandon that every negotiation needed leverage, and she'd been saving their most powerful weapon for exactly this moment. Dad, there's something else you need to know, Brandon said, his voice shifting to a softer tone that reminded me of the boy he used to be. Amber's pregnant. The words hit me like a physical blow. Pregnant? 3 months. We're going to have a baby. His face lit up with genuine happiness, the first unguarded emotion I'd seen from him in months. You're going to be a grandfather. For a moment, all the business disagreements and family tensions faded away. This was my son telling me he was going to be a father. This was the continuation of our family line, a new generation to carry forward everything we'd built. Congratulations, son. That's wonderful news. I meant it despite everything else that was happening between us. Thank you, Dad. And that's exactly why this conversation about the business is so important now. We're not just thinking about ourselves anymore. We're thinking about our child's future, about the kind of inheritance we want to leave behind. Inheritance. The word carried weight, implications that went far beyond simple congratulations. Brandon, this business is already a solid inheritance. It's been supporting our family for 33 years. But imagine what it could be with the right growth strategy. Imagine leaving our child a company worth $20 million instead of $5 million at $20 million. The numbers kept getting bigger with each conversation, as if increasing the scale of the promises would somehow make them more convincing. Son, I'd rather leave our grandchild a company with integrity and a sustainable future than a debt-laden operation designed to impress investors. Dad, you're not thinking about this clearly. We have an opportunity to build real wealth here, generational wealth. The kind of money that could pay for private schools, college anywhere in the country, graduate degrees, whatever our child wants to pursue. This company already provides all of those things, if that's what our grandchild chooses. Your mother and I put you through UT without borrowing a dime, but we could do so much more. Amber's been researching private schools in Austin. The best ones cost $30,000 a year. Then there's college. Top-tier universities are running $70,000 a year now. We're talking about serious money, Dad. I looked at my son, trying to understand when providing for his family had become about maximizing every possible dollar instead of building something meaningful and sustainable. Brandon, money doesn't buy character. It doesn't buy work ethic. It doesn't buy the satisfaction that comes from building something with your own hands. No, but it buys opportunities. It buys options. It buys the kind of security that lets people pursue their dreams without worrying about basic survival. And what happens when those opportunities come at the cost of your integrity? When those options require you to compromise the values that made success possible in the first place? Brandon was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the equipment yard where I'd taught him to operate heavy machinery when he was barely old enough to reach the pedals. Dad, can I ask you something honestly? Always. Do you think I'm capable of running this company? The question caught me off guard. Of course you're capable. You've been working here for 15 years. You know the business inside and out. Then why won't you trust me to make decisions about its future? Because the decisions you're talking about aren't about running the company. They're about selling it to strangers who don't understand what we've built here. We're not selling anything, we're growing it by giving up control to investors who can outvote us whenever they choose. Sterling Capital doesn't work that way. They're partners, not owners. How do you know that? Have you read their standard partnership agreements? Have you talked to other family business owners who've worked with them? Brandon hesitated. Amber's been handling the due diligence. She has the expertise to evaluate these kinds of arrangements. Amber has the expertise to evaluate marketing campaigns. She's never owned a business, never built anything from scratch, never had to make payroll when clients were slow to pay their bills. That's not fair, Dad. She's got a master's degree in business administration and 5 years of experience consulting with companies like ours. Companies like ours? What companies? Construction businesses? Family operations that have been around for 30 plus years? Or startup companies looking for quick cash infusions? I don't know the specifics, but you're willing to bet our family's future on her expertise without knowing the specifics? The conversation was interrupted by the sound of tires on gravel. Through the office window, I could see Amber's white Mercedes pulling into the parking lot. She stepped out wearing a sundress and designer sandals, completely inappropriate for a construction site, carrying her ever-present phone and a leather portfolio. "I called her when you agreed to meet," Brandon said apologetically. She wanted to be part of this conversation. Of course she did. Amber walked into the office with the confidence of someone who owned the place, setting her portfolio on the conference table and greeting Brandon with a kiss that seemed designed more for my benefit than his. "Charlie, I'm so glad Brandon convinced you to meet with us," she said, as if I hadn't been forced out of my own son's wedding 12 hours earlier. "I know we've had our differences, but I really believe we can work together for everyone's benefit." "Amber, congratulations on the pregnancy. That's wonderful news. Thank you. And that's exactly why this meeting is so important. We need to think about the long-term financial stability of the Morrison family." The Morrison family. She'd been married to my son for one day, and she was already talking about the Morrison family as if she'd been part of it for generations. The Morrison family has been financially stable for 33 years without outside investors. Stable, yes, but not optimized for growth. Not positioned to take advantage of the opportunities available in today's market. She opened her portfolio and began spreading out documents, market analysis reports, financial projections, partnership proposals from Sterling Capital Group. Everything was printed on expensive paper with professional binding, the kind of presentation materials designed to impress clients who made decisions based on appearance rather than substance. "Charlie, I want to show you something that might change your perspective on this opportunity." She placed a single sheet of paper in front of me. "This is a projected 5-year growth plan based on Sterling Capital's investment and expertise." The document showed Morrison Construction growing from $2.8 million in annual revenue to $25 million by year 5. The numbers were laid out in colorful charts and graphs that made the progression look inevitable rather than speculative. $25 million? I studied the projections, trying to understand the assumptions behind such dramatic growth. "Conservative estimate," Amber said confidently. "Based on their track record with similar companies and the expansion opportunities they've identified in the Texas construction market." "What expansion opportunities?" "State infrastructure projects, corporate development contracts, residential subdivision work. Markets we've never pursued because we haven't had the capital or resources to compete effectively. We've never pursued those markets because they require different expertise, different equipment, and relationships with different types of clients. We're not a highway construction company. We're not a residential developer. We build commercial projects for clients who've trusted us for decades." "But that's exactly the point, Charlie," Amber continued, her voice taking on the patient tone of a teacher explaining something to a slow student. "You've been limiting your growth potential by staying in familiar markets. Sterling Capital specializes in helping established companies expand into new sectors where the real money is." The real money? I looked at the projections again, noting how the dramatic revenue increases were supposed to come from markets I'd deliberately avoided for 3 decades. "Amber, do you know why we don't chase state highway contracts? Because you haven't had the resources to compete effectively? Because state highway contracts require massive equipment investments, bonding capabilities most small companies can't afford, and political connections that take decades to develop. When those contracts go bad, and they often do, they can bankrupt companies 10 times our size." "That's why you need Sterling Capital's backing," Brandon interjected. "They have the financial resources and industry connections to help us compete in those markets successfully. And when we can't deliver on those massive contracts because we don't have the expertise or workforce to handle them, Sterling Capital owns our equipment, our client list, and our reputation while we're left with the debt." Amber's professional smile wavered slightly. "Charlie, you're being very negative about opportunities that could transform your family's financial future. I'm being realistic about risks that could destroy what my family has spent 33 years building." But you're not considering the potential rewards. Look at these numbers. She pointed to the 5-year projection showing Morrison Construction growing to $25 million annually. Even if we only achieved half of this projected growth, your grandson would inherit a company worth more than most people see in their entire careers. My grandson. She was already using the baby as justification for decisions that could cost him everything his family had built. Amber, let me ask you something. Have you ever run a construction company? I've consulted with dozens of construction companies on growth strategies and market positioning. That's not what I asked. Have you ever been responsible for meeting payroll when a client delays payment for 3 months? Have you ever had to tell a loyal employee that you can't afford to keep him because a project went over budget? Have you ever signed a personal guarantee on $1 million loan knowing that your family's home would be collateral if the project failed? Charlie, those are exactly the kinds of problems that Sterling Capital's resources and expertise would eliminate. No, Amber, those are exactly the kinds of problems that teach you the difference between building a business and gambling with other people's money. Brandon stood up abruptly, his face flushed with frustration. Dad, this is impossible. Every suggestion we make, every opportunity we present, you find reasons to reject it. It's like you want this company to stay small forever. I want this company to stay solvent forever. I want it to still exist when your son graduates college, not be a cautionary tale about family businesses that grew too fast and collapsed under their own debt. That's not going to happen. Sterling Capital has a proven track record. With what kinds of companies? Show me 3 family construction businesses they've partnered with that are still operating under family control after 5 years. Amber and Brandon exchanged a look. We don't have that specific information with us today, she said carefully, but we can certainly research their portfolio companies for you. You don't have that information because you never asked for it. You're so excited about the money they're promising that you never bothered to find out what happened to the other families who believed the same promises. The room fell silent except for the hum of the air conditioning and the distant sound of traffic on the highway. Through the window, I could see storm clouds building on the horizon, the kind of afternoon thunderstorm that could turn a construction site into a muddy mess in 20 minutes. Charlie, Amber finally said, her voice taking on a harder edge, I understand your caution. I really do. But sometimes caution becomes an excuse for refusing to grow, refusing to adapt to changing market conditions. And sometimes adaptation becomes an excuse for abandoning the principles that made success possible in the first place. Maybe we need to approach this differently, Brandon said. Dad, what if we started smaller? What if we just tested one of Sterling Capital's recommendations, maybe the event venue concept, and see how it performs before making any major changes to the construction business? You want to turn our family ranch into a commercial venue as a test case? We want to explore revenue opportunities that don't require major capital investment or business restructuring, Amber corrected. The ranch has enormous potential as an event space. We could start with corporate retreats, maybe a few high-end weddings, and see what kind of return we generate. And where would I live while strangers are having weddings in my backyard? You'd still live there, Dad. We'd just be sharing the space with paying customers a few weekends a month. Sharing the space. With paying customers. In the house where my wife died, where my son grew up, where 3 generations of my family had found peace and privacy. No. The word came out flat, final, without room for negotiation. Dad, you're not even considering. I said no, Brandon. The ranch is not for sale. It's not for rent. It's not available for corporate retreats or high-end weddings or any other commercial use. It's our family home, and it's going to stay that way. Amber leaned forward, her professional mask finally slipping to reveal something colder underneath. Charlie, I need to be direct with you. Brandon owns 35% of this company. That gives him significant rights regarding its future direction. And I own 65%, which gives me controlling interest and final decision-making authority. But only as long as you're competent to exercise that authority. The threat hung in the air like smoke from a grass fire. I looked at my son, waiting for him to object, to defend me, to remind his wife that she was talking about his father. But Brandon said nothing. Are you questioning my competence, Amber? I'm pointing out that business decisions based on emotional attachment rather than financial logic might suggest that personal feelings are interfering with sound judgment. Emotional attachment to the company I built from nothing, To the land my family has owned for 60 years? To outdated business models that limit growth potential and reduce the inheritance you'll be able to leave your grandson? My grandson will inherit a company with integrity and a sustainable business model, not a debt-ridden shell owned by investors who'll strip it for parts the moment it stops being profitable. That's your opinion, Charlie. But if your judgment is being clouded by nostalgia and fear of change, then perhaps other people should have more input into major business decisions. Other people, like Sterling Capital Group and their financial engineers who'd never built anything more substantial than a PowerPoint presentation. I stood up, walked to the safe in the corner of the office, and pulled out the corporate documents that established Morrison Construction 33 years ago. The original articles of incorporation signed by my wife and me when Brandon was barely walking. The operating agreement that gave me sole authority over major business decisions. The insurance policies and bonding agreements that were guaranteed by my personal assets and reputation. "Amber, let me show you something," I said, spreading the documents on the conference table. "These papers establish my legal authority to make decisions about this company. My wife and I structured the ownership this way specifically to prevent hostile takeovers, whether they come from competitors or consultants with ambitious plans." She glanced at the documents dismissively. "Legal structures can be modified, Charlie, especially when they no longer serve the best interests of all shareholders. Are you threatening a lawsuit against me? I'm suggesting that if you continue to refuse reasonable growth opportunities, other stakeholders might have to explore legal options to protect their interests." "Other stakeholders?" I looked directly at my son. "Brandon, is that how you see yourself now? As a stakeholder instead of my son?" For the first time since the conversation began, Brandon looked genuinely uncomfortable. "Dad, that's not... I'm both. I'm your son, but I'm also a business partner and a father-to-be who needs to think about his family's future. And apparently you think the best way to secure that future is to threaten legal action against your own father." "Nobody's threatening anything," he said quickly, but his eyes wouldn't meet mine. "We're just trying to find a way to move forward that works for everyone." "Everyone? Including Sterling Capital Group? Because it sounds like you've already promised them something in exchange for their interest in our company." Amber's phone buzzed, and she glanced at it with the kind of urgency that suggested this wasn't a casual interruption. "Actually, Charlie, since you brought up Sterling Capital, there's something you should know. They're prepared to make a formal offer for the company. The company's not for sale. Everything's for sale at the right price," she replied smoothly. "And they're prepared to offer significantly more than the $8 million valuation we discussed earlier." I felt my blood pressure rising. "You had the company appraised without my knowledge or consent?" "We had preliminary discussions about potential valuation," Brandon said defensively. "It wasn't a formal appraisal. It was due diligence," Amber corrected. "Standard procedure when exploring partnership opportunities. Sterling Capital needed to understand the scope and value of the operation before making any commitments." "And what did you tell them about our client relationships, our pending contracts, our equipment and real estate holdings?" "Only what was necessary to give them an accurate picture of the business potential. You gave confidential business information to strangers who want to buy us out, and you don't see anything wrong with that?" "They're not strangers, Dad. They're professional investors with decades of experience in business development. They're vultures, Brandon. Corporate raiders who identify family businesses in transition and exploit the family conflicts to acquire valuable assets at below-market prices." "That's not what this is," Amber insisted. But something in her tone suggested she knew exactly what this was. "Isn't it? Let me guess their offer. They'll pay $10 million for the company, keep me on as a consultant for 2 years at a fraction of my current income, retain Brandon in a management role with no real authority, and then systematically eliminate everything that made Morrison Construction successful in the first place." The silence that followed told me I wasn't far from the truth. "The offer is $12 million, Amber finally said. "Payable over 5 years, with performance incentives that could bring the total to $15 million. $12 million payable over 5 years? So $2.4 million per year for a company that's currently generating $2.8 million in annual revenue? That's not a buyout. That's a theft disguised as an installment plan. It's a fair offer that provides immediate liquidity and long-term growth potential," she countered. "For who? Sterling Capital gets a profitable company with established client relationships for the price of a good office building. I get slightly less money than I'm already making, spread over 5 years, with no guarantee that I'll see the final payments if the company doesn't meet their performance expectations." "Dad, you're 58 years old," Brandon said quietly. You could retire, enjoy your life, not have to worry about payroll and client problems and equipment maintenance. And what would I do with myself? Play golf, travel to places I don't want to see, sit on the porch and watch strangers run the company I spent 33 years building? You could spend time with your grandson, help raise him, pass on your knowledge and experience by showing him how his grandfather sold out everything his family built because some consultant convinced him it was the smart financial move. The storm that had been building outside finally arrived with a crack of thunder that rattled the office windows. Rain began hitting the glass in heavy drops, and I could hear the wind picking up across the equipment yard. "Charlie," Amber said, trying a different approach, "I understand this is emotional for you. It would be emotional for anyone. But sometimes the most loving thing a parent can do is make the difficult decisions that secure their children's future, even if those decisions are personally painful. Is that what you think this is? A loving sacrifice for my son's benefit? I think it's an opportunity to transform a modest family business into generational wealth. Your grandson could grow up never worrying about money, never having to work construction jobs in the Texas heat, never having to stress about making payroll during slow periods. My grandson could also grow up never understanding the satisfaction of building something with his own hands, never learning the value of honest work, never experiencing the pride that comes from solving problems and serving customers and building relationships that last decades. Pride doesn't pay for Harvard tuition or medical school or the kind of opportunities that real wealth can provide." I walked back to the window, watching the rain sweep across the parking lot in sheets. In 33 years of business, I'd weathered storms of every kind: economic downturns, difficult clients, equipment failures, family emergencies. But I'd never faced a storm that came from inside my own family. "Amber, let me ask you something. When you married my son yesterday, did you take vows to love him in sickness and in health, for richer or poorer?" "Of course." "Then why is your first priority as his wife to make sure he's never poor? Why not focus on making sure he's never sick? Sick with greed, sick with ambition, sick with the kind of values that put money before family? Because money provides security, Charlie, and security provides peace of mind, and peace of mind allows people to focus on the things that really matter instead of constantly worrying about survival. I've been providing security for this family for 33 years without selling out to corporate investors. Brandon grew up secure. He went to college secure. He learned the business in a secure environment where mistakes were learning opportunities instead of threats to our survival. But that security was limited by the size of the operation. Imagine what Brandon could provide for his son with Sterling Capital's resources backing him. I can imagine exactly what he could provide. The same thing every other family provides when they sell their legacy to corporate buyers. Temporary wealth followed by permanent regret. Thunder crashed again, closer this time. Through the rain-streaked window, I could see our equipment sitting in the yard. Excavators and bulldozers and concrete trucks that had built schools and hospitals and office buildings across Central Texas. Machines that represented decades of reinvested profits and careful business decisions. "Dad," Brandon said softly, "what if we're right? What if this really is an opportunity to build something bigger and better than what we have now?" I turned to look at my son, really look at him. I saw the boy who used to help me service equipment on weekends. I saw the teenager who worked construction jobs every summer to learn the business from the ground up. I saw the college graduate who came home instead of pursuing easier opportunities in Austin or Dallas. But I also saw something else. I saw a man who'd been convinced that everything his family had built wasn't enough. A man who'd been taught to measure success by numbers on a spreadsheet instead of relationships built over decades. "Brandon, if I'm wrong about Sterling Capital, the worst that happens is we miss out on some extra money. If you're wrong, we lose everything 3 generations of our family worked to build. Are you willing to bet your son's inheritance on the chance that I'm wrong?" The question hung in the air between us like the thunder still echoing outside. Brandon stared at me for a long moment, rain drumming against the windows like machine gun fire. I could see him weighing the question, calculating odds the way Amber had taught him to approach every decision as a risk-benefit analysis. "Dad, I think you're being too pessimistic about this opportunity. Sterling Capital isn't some fly-by-night operation. They manage over $300 million in assets. They have a team of experts who specialize in growing family businesses. Growing them or buying them? Both. It's the same thing in today's market. No, son, it's not the same thing at all. Growing a business means reinvesting profits, expanding capabilities, and building long-term relationships. Buying a business means extracting value as quickly as possible and moving on to the next target. Amber's phone buzzed again. She glanced at it and stood up abruptly. "Gentlemen, I need to take this call. It's Richard Sterling himself." She walked out of the office, leaving Brandon and me alone for the first time in months. The silence stretched between us, filled only by the sound of rain and distant thunder. "Dad," Brandon finally said, "when did we become enemies?" The question hit me harder than any business threat or legal ultimatum. "We're not enemies, son, but we're not partners anymore either." "Why not?" "What changed?" "You changed, Brandon. 3 years ago, you cared about building something meaningful. Now you care about maximizing shareholder value. I care about providing for my family. Your family was already provided for. This company generates enough profit to support multiple generations if it's managed responsibly, but not enough to make us wealthy. Really wealthy. And when did that become the goal? When did enough stop being enough?" Brandon walked to the window, looking out at the equipment yard where we'd spent countless hours together, maintaining machines, planning projects, building the foundation of what had become a solid, profitable business. "Dad, do you know what it's like to go to business conferences and have people look down on you because you run a small family operation? Do you know what it feels like to watch guys you went to college with buying second homes and sending their kids to private schools while you're still driving a 10-year-old pickup truck? I know what it feels like to sleep well at night because I don't owe money I can't pay back. I know what it feels like to look clients in the eye and promise them something I can actually deliver. I know what it feels like to sign my name to a contract and know that my word means something. Those are nice sentiments, Dad, but they don't pay for the kind of life Amber and I want to build." "What kind of life is that exactly? One where you measure success by how much money you can borrow against future earnings? One where we don't have to worry about money, where we can focus on enjoying our family instead of constantly stressing about business problems?" "Brandon, I've been running this business for 33 years. I've raised you, paid for your education, and built something that can support our family for generations. When exactly have you seen me constantly stressing about business problems?" He was quiet for a moment. "It's different now, Dad. The market is more competitive. Clients expect more. Technology changes faster. And you think Sterling Capital understands construction technology better than we do? You think corporate executives in suits understand client relationships better than contractors who've been in the trenches for decades? I think they understand financial management and growth strategies better than small family businesses usually do." "Financial management? Son, this company has been profitable every year since 1987. We've never missed a payroll, never defaulted on a loan, never had to lay off employees because of poor planning. What exactly do you think Sterling Capital is going to teach us about financial management?" Before Brandon could answer, Amber returned from her phone call, her face flushed with excitement. "That was Richard Sterling. He's prepared to increase the offer to $15 million, paid over 3 years instead of 5. $15 million? Brandon's eyes lit up like a teenager seeing his first sports car. $5 million per year for 3 years, I calculated aloud. Still less than twice our current annual revenue, for a company that took 33 years to build and has decades of growth potential ahead of it. "Charlie, that's more money than most people see in their entire careers," Amber said. "Think about what Brandon could do with $5 million guaranteed every year. I'm thinking about what he could do with a business that's already generating $2.8 million every year and increasing steadily without any debt or outside obligations. But this offer provides immediate liquidity and removes all the business risks. It also removes all the business rewards, all the satisfaction, all the pride of ownership, all the legacy value. Charlie, you're being sentimental about business decisions that should be based on financial logic. And you're being mercenary about family assets that represent 3 generations of work and sacrifice." The room fell silent except for the continuing rain. Brandon stood between us, literally and figuratively, torn between his father's values and his wife's ambitions. "Dad," he said slowly, "what if we compromise? What if we accept Sterling Capital's offer, but negotiate for me to stay on as president with significant operational control? Under what authority? If they own the company, they make the decisions. If they think your operational control is limiting their profitability, They'll replace you with someone who shares their priorities. That won't happen. Richard Sterling specifically mentioned wanting to retain family management. For how long? Until the next quarterly review when their profits don't meet projections? Amber sat down heavily, her professional composure finally cracking. Charlie, I need to be completely honest with you. Brandon and I have already given Sterling Capital a preliminary acceptance of their offer, contingent on your agreement. The words hit me like a physical blow. You what? We told them we were prepared to move forward if they met our conditions. What conditions? Guaranteed management positions for Brandon, consulting role for you if you wanted it, and protection for key employees. You committed our family company to a sale without my knowledge or consent? We committed to exploring the opportunity seriously, Brandon said defensively. We haven't signed anything binding. But you've created expectations. You've led them to believe this deal was going to happen, because we believe it should happen, Amber said firmly. Charlie, this is the opportunity of a lifetime, Don Sterling Capital's final offer, and we need to give them an answer by tomorrow morning. Tomorrow morning. After 33 years of building, 3 hours of negotiating, and they wanted an answer by tomorrow morning. And if I say no, then we'll have to explore our legal options for protecting Brandon's ownership interests, Amber said quietly. Legal options? Brandon owns 35% of this company. He has rights that can't be ignored indefinitely, including the right to force a sale, including the right to fair treatment and equal consideration of legitimate business opportunities. I looked at my son, waiting for him to object, to defend me, to remind his wife that she was threatening to sue his father. But Brandon said nothing. So this is how it ends? I said finally. After everything we've built together, after all the years of working side by side, it comes down to lawyers and lawsuits and forcing me to sell to people who don't understand the first thing about what we've created here. Dad, it doesn't have to be like this. Just say yes. Accept the offer. Let's move forward as a family. A family that settles disputes with legal threats. A family that sells its legacy to the highest bidder. That's not the family I raised you to be part of. Thunder crashed overhead, close enough to rattle the building. In the sudden silence that followed, I made a decision that would change everything. I walked to my desk, opened the bottom drawer, and pulled out a manila envelope I'd hoped never to need. Inside were documents I'd prepared 2 years ago when I first started noticing changes in Brandon's priorities, documents my lawyer Henry Davis had advised me to keep updated, just in case family relationships ever deteriorated to the point where legal protection became necessary. What's that? Amber asked, her voice losing its confident edge for the first time all day. Insurance, I said, spreading the papers on the conference table. Legal documents that my wife and I had prepared when we first incorporated this company, updated periodically as circumstances changed. Brandon leaned forward to read the papers. His face went pale as he recognized what he was looking at. Dad, is this It's a family trust agreement, son, established to protect Morrison Construction from exactly the kind of situation we're facing today. I pointed to the relevant sections, my voice steady despite the storm of emotions raging inside me. According to these documents, if any family member attempts to force a sale of company assets through legal action, their ownership interest automatically reverts to the trust, which I control as sole trustee. You can't do that, Amber said, but uncertainty had crept into her voice. I can, and I will. These documents were prepared by the best corporate lawyers in Texas and reviewed multiple times over the years. Your husband's 35% ownership comes with specific obligations and restrictions designed to prevent exactly what you're trying to do. What obligations? Brandon asked quietly. Loyalty to the family business mission, good faith participation in company management, and most importantly, prohibition against actions that would force dissolution or sale of company assets for personal financial gain. That's not what we're doing, Dad, isn't it? You've been negotiating with outside buyers without my knowledge, sharing confidential business information with potential acquirers, and threatening legal action to force me to accept their offer. How exactly is that not forcing dissolution for personal financial gain? Amber's phone buzzed again. She glanced at it and stood up abruptly. I need to call Richard Sterling. We need to explain this complication. There's no complication to explain, I said firmly. There's no sale to consider. Sterling Capital can take their offer and find another family business to destroy. Charlie, you're making a huge mistake. This offer won't be available indefinitely. Good. I hope it expires before you have a chance to cause any more damage. Amber stormed out of the office to make her phone call, leaving Brandon and me alone again. The rain was beginning to lighten, but the tension in the room remained as thick as the humidity outside. Dad, why didn't you tell me about these trust documents? Because I hoped I'd never need them. Because I believed you understood the difference between owning part of a family business and being entitled to sell it to the highest bidder. I do understand the difference. But I also understand that you're using legal technicalities to override my rights as a partner. I'm using legal protections to preserve what 3 generations of our family built together. Rights come with responsibilities, Brandon. If you're not willing to accept the responsibilities, you don't get to exercise the rights. What responsibilities? I've worked for this company for 15 years. I've given everything I have to this business. You've worked for the company, yes. But for the past 3 years, you've been working against it. Every suggestion Amber makes, every opportunity she identifies, every growth strategy she proposes is designed to extract value from what we've built, not to strengthen it. That's not true, isn't it? Tell me one suggestion she's made that would benefit our current clients or improve our existing services. Tell me one recommendation that would strengthen our relationships with the subcontractors and suppliers who've worked with us for decades. Brandon was quiet for several minutes, staring out at the equipment yard where our trucks and machinery sat waiting for Monday morning and another week of honest work. Dad, what if you're wrong? What if Sterling Capital really could help us grow into something bigger and better? Then we'll grow at our own pace, using our own resources, maintaining our own values. If there are opportunities worth pursuing, we'll pursue them without selling our independence to corporate investors. But that will take years, maybe decades. Good businesses are built in years and decades, not in quarterly earnings reports designed to impress stockholders. Amber returned from her phone call, her face flushed with anger and frustration. Richard Sterling is not happy about this development. He's prepared to increase the offer to $18 million, but only if we can resolve these legal complications within 48 hours. $18 million? Brandon's eyes widened despite everything that had just transpired. For a company generating $2.8 million annually, with growth potential, that could reach $5 million within 5 years if managed properly, I calculated. Still a bargain basement price for investors who understand the real value of what we've built. Charlie, this is our final offer. If you reject this, Sterling Capital will withdraw from negotiations entirely. I looked at Amber, then at my son, then back at the trust documents spread across the conference table. In that moment, I realized that this had never been about money or growth opportunities or securing Brandon's future. This had been about control. Control of a successful business that Amber saw as her ticket to the kind of wealth and status she'd always wanted. Amber, I want you to understand something very clearly. Morrison Construction is not for sale, not to Sterling Capital, not to any other investors, not at any price. The company will remain under family control as long as I'm alive, and after I'm gone, it will be protected by legal structures that prevent exactly the kind of exploitation you've been planning. You're making a mistake that will cost your family millions of dollars. I'm making a decision that will preserve something more valuable than money, our integrity, our independence, and our right to build something meaningful without answering to corporate masters who don't understand the first thing about what we do. Brandon, are you going to let your father destroy your financial future? For the first time in 3 years, Brandon looked directly at me instead of deferring to his wife's judgment. What he said next determined not just the future of our business, but the future of our relationship as father and son. Amber, I need some time to think about this. This is all happening too fast. Time? Brandon, we don't have time. Sterling Capital needs an answer by tomorrow morning, then they'll get one. But it will be my answer, based on my judgment, not your pressure tactics or their artificial deadlines. Amber's professional mask finally shattered completely. Your judgment? Brandon, your judgment is compromised by emotional attachment and family loyalty. You're not thinking clearly about what's best for our future. Maybe not, Brandon said quietly, but it's still my decision to make. I felt something shift in the room, something I hadn't felt in 3 years. The possibility that my son might remember who he used to be before Amber convinced him that everything we'd built together wasn't enough. That conversation in my office marked the beginning of the end for Brandon's marriage, though it took 8 months for the divorce to become final. The Sterling Capital deal collapsed within a week when their due diligence revealed the family trust protections I'd put in place. Without the promise of easy money from a business sale, Amber discovered that being married to a construction company manager in rural Texas wasn't the lifestyle she'd envisioned for herself. She filed for divorce 3 months after our confrontation, citing irreconcilable differences regarding financial planning and career priorities. The settlement gave her half of Brandon's personal assets and full custody of their daughter Claire, now 3 years old, with Brandon getting visitation rights every other weekend. Amber moved to Dallas within 6 months, taking Claire with her. She's now married to a hotel developer named Richard Blackstone, ironically, someone she met through her Sterling Capital connections. They live in a $2 million house in Preston Hollow and post photos on social media of their trips to Europe and their charity galas. She looks happy in the pictures, though there's something calculated about her smile that reminds me why I never trusted her motivations. Brandon came to see me the day his divorce was finalized. He looked older, worn down by months of legal battles and the realization that he'd almost destroyed everything our family had built for a woman who never loved him as much as she loved what she thought she could get from him. "Dad, I owe you an apology that's about 2 years overdue. You owe me more than an apology, son. But it's a start." We were sitting on the porch of the ranch house, watching the sunset paint the Texas sky in shades of orange and purple. The same porch where we'd planned the future of Morrison Construction when he was fresh out of college and full of dreams about building something meaningful with his life. I was stupid, Dad. Stupid and greedy and so convinced that I knew better than you about everything. You weren't stupid, Brandon. You were manipulated by someone who understood exactly which buttons to push to make you doubt everything we'd built together. But I should have seen through it. I should have trusted you instead of trusting her. Love makes fools of all of us, son. The important thing is learning from our mistakes. Can I ask you something honestly? Always. Would you ever consider letting me back into the business? I know I don't deserve it, but working construction for other people has shown me what I lost when I walked away from Morrison Construction. For the past year, Brandon had been working as a project manager for a larger construction company in Austin. The money was decent, but he was just another employee in a corporate structure that cared more about profit margins than client relationships. He'd learned the hard way what I'd been trying to tell him about the difference between owning something meaningful and working for someone else's profit. "The business has a position open for a junior project manager," I said carefully. "Someone who could learn our systems, rebuild relationships with clients and subcontractors, and prove himself over time." "Junior project manager? Dad, I'm 32 years old with 15 years of experience. You're 32 years old with 15 years of experience and 3 years of poor judgment that cost this company clients, reputation, and family harmony. If you want to rebuild trust, you'll need to earn it the same way I did. One project at a time, one satisfied customer at a time." Brandon was quiet for several minutes, watching a red-tailed hawk circle over the pasture where our cattle grazed peacefully in the evening light. "What would the position pay?" $65,000 to start, with performance bonuses based on project completion and client satisfaction. About half what you were making before you left, but honest money earned through honest work. And the path back to partnership? Depends on you. Prove that you understand what this business is really about: serving clients, building relationships, maintaining quality, and we'll discuss expanding your role. Prove that you're still looking for quick money and easy shortcuts, and you'll stay at junior level until you find somewhere else to work. Those are pretty strict terms. Those are fair terms for someone who tried to sell his family's business to corporate raiders. Brandon stood up and walked to the porch railing, looking out at the land where his great-grandfather had first settled, where his grandfather had built the foundation of our construction business, where his father had raised him to understand the value of honest work. "Dad, I accept your terms. When can I start?" "Monday morning, 7 a.m. sharp. We've got a school renovation project that's behind schedule and over budget. If you can help us bring it in on time and within the revised budget, that'll go a long way toward rebuilding trust with our clients. And with you, with me will take longer, son, but you're still my boy, and this will always be your home." That was 2 years ago. Today, Brandon is 34 and I'm 60. Morrison Construction is doing better than ever. $3.2 million in annual revenue, 12 full-time employees, and a client list that trusts us to deliver what we promise. Brandon has worked his way back up to senior project manager and has proven himself capable of handling complex projects without cutting corners or chasing unrealistic profits. We still sit on the porch some evenings drinking beer and talking about the business. But the conversations are different now. Instead of talking about scaling up and maximizing shareholder value, we talk about maintaining quality and building relationships that will last another generation. Every other weekend when Brandon picks up Claire for his visitation, he brings her to the ranch. She's a bright little girl with her grandfather's stubborn streak and her father's quick mind. She loves riding the horses, feeding the chickens, and helping us with simple maintenance tasks around the property. "Grandpa Charlie," she asked me last weekend, "why do you and Daddy work so hard on the ranch when you could just buy everything from the store?" "Because some things can't be bought from the store, sweetheart. Things like pride in your work, satisfaction from building something with your own hands, and the knowledge that you've contributed something meaningful to the world, like the school you and Daddy built for my friends. Exactly like that. The school will be there long after Grandpa Charlie is gone, and every child who learns there will be learning in a building that your daddy and I built together." She nodded seriously, the way children do when they're trying to understand concepts that adults take for granted. "My name is Charlie Morrison. I'm 60 years old, and this was the story of how I almost lost my son and my business to people who understood the price of everything and the value of nothing. The company is still mine, my son is still my partner, and my granddaughter will grow up understanding the difference between earning something and taking it. Sometimes the greatest victory isn't getting what you want. It's protecting what matters most, even when it costs you everything you thought you needed.